Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks so much. Really lovely to see you all here. We are recording this as we said in our information, because we do love to share our learning circles, which are always amazing with our members. I'm just so pleased to see you all here. If you are happy to turn on your camera so we can see your face, you're very welcome to. Um, I'm Lisa Siegel, the president of A2E and really pleased to have our guest, the Honorable John Seed, here with us today. Andrew Snedden, our projects officer, will be helping us with tech support. You're really welcome to be asking questions. Well, we will have a question session at the end. But with no further ado, I am going to start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge country and the traditional owners of country throughout Australia, whose land was never ceded, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And I'm aware, well, we did have people registered today from, I think, every state and territory, which is amazing. Paying our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures across this continent who have cared for and exemplified connection to country over countless generations in a very deeply ecological way. And deep ecology does have a very strong connection to Indigenous ways of knowing, which I'm sure will come up in our conversation today. I also want to, we often also begin, or we do begin our events by kind of acknowledging that, to take a moment to acknowledge the context in which we gather at a time when the human species is having an unprecedented impact on this planet. We do this at the beginning of this gathering to remind us that the discussions we have here, the decisions we make, any actions we take will have consequences for other people and other species, both those living now and future generations. We just like to kind of remind ourselves of this at the beginning of our meetings, at our gatherings, at our learning circles, in our organization. And I don't need to tell everybody that we are living in very unusual times. I currently also want to acknowledge that I'm in the United States at the moment. I'm on Ohlone country in San Jose, California, where I grew up visiting my family here. Although I've lived on Gumbaynggirr country for 3 decades. It's very interesting to be here in this country at this time. And when we all know that what's happening here is affecting our whole planet. And in spite of that, the natural beauty of, I was just sharing with John and Andrew, of the country continues to astound me. So if you would like to make an acknowledgement of the country that you're from in the chat, we welcome that very much, just to share where you're coming from. If you'd like to, you don't have to, but that's always lovely. I'm going to stop sharing now so that we can, and I'll share, that few things at the end. Have I stopped sharing? Yes. Is that good, Andrew? Oh, no. Okay. Now, can we all see each other a little better? Is that better? Okay. Great. Thank you. Welcome, Sonia. Great to see you. So, without any further ado, let's just pop. What we're going to do today is I'm going to introduce John, and then we are going to have a conversation, and then we will we'll hopefully leave about 20 minutes at the end of the hour for you to ask questions, have discussion, open it up for everybody. So that's usually a very rich way to kind of summarize our learning circles. I guess before I welcome John, I did want to say, because we noticed in the registrations that there's quite a few people here that are Maybe it's your first time at an A squared E squared event. So I want to and of course there are many members here as well. Hello to all of you, but I also want to welcome people who haven't perhaps been to an A squared E squared event before. Australian Association for Environmental Education is the peak body for professional and volunteer environmental educations in Australia. We are cross-sectoral, so we have teachers, tertiary educators, community educators, government people, business people, anybody that calls themselves an environmental educator. We're very inclusive and very welcoming. So we're really particularly glad to welcome all of you who came here via John's email list and who, found us that way, and ask us any questions about that later on if you want. Okay, so without any further ado, I am super, super pleased to be in this conversation with John tonight. So I met John, I don't know, maybe 15, maybe 20 years ago. I would consider John one of my teachers in the environmental movement. I think the first time we met John was at Bundagen on the mid-north coast where I live, at a Deep Ecology workshop, a Council of All Beings workshop. And boom, my world just opened up. And it was very helpful to understand my lifelong affinity towards the natural world in such a creative way. Most of you probably know John, but and I was just saying to him before, I could basically spend the whole hour telling you about all the things that he's done for the past almost 50 years for the environmental movement. But the highlights, I guess I would say, is, for nearly 50 years, John's been an amazing advocate, especially for our forests. John founded the Rainforest Information Center, which is still going strong after 4 decades, I think, John, or more than 4 decades. Campaigns around the world, successful campaigns in Australia and around the world to save amazing forests. An author, an artist, a poet, a singer, and was granted the OAM in 1995, in recognition of John's work. I think, I don't know, what is that word? Polyglot, a man of many talents. But I think the main thing I want to say about John is, through all these years that I've known you, John, it's your passion, your unwavering passion, in spite of health issues, in spite of everything, your unwavering dedication and passion to this planet that is the most obvious and fact about your biography. So I just wanted to say that. And yeah, just really happy that you are willing to share your journey with us today. So we talked about this, and John has offered to start this conversation with a poem. Would you like to start, John?
The flame has lit up the world from within. All things, individually and collectively, are interpenetrated and flooded by it. You who mold the manifold so as to breathe your life into it, I pray to you. The first verse of the universe, pours forth like a sea of mystery. Out of the void, unmanifest silence. Space-time comes into existence, unseen shaping, swirling, unfurling. Hydrogen, helium, divine is revealed within galactic whirlpools. As energy flows in, a star collapses, supernova explosion, cloud of cosmic debris, drawn together by gravity, by the mystery of attraction, primordial bonding, universe action, stardust swirling, swarming gases, organizing and forming masses. See, the sun is the one that spun the 9 others. Give birth to Mother Earth and her sisters and brothers. Mercury, Venus, Mars and Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. Every one is the sun. The sun is the one. Everyone. Everybody better wake up. And the earth gave birth to continents and oceans, shaping and shaking in waves of emotion, crashes of lightning, bombarding and striking, exposing the globe as it glows like a strobe and setting the stage for the first cell of life. So simple, so basic, so primal that I place it at the top of the chain from which all life sprang. More forms adorn the earth as they bring diversity dispersing the song of creation. Ring in the dawn, sing along in celebration. I just want to celebrate, celebrate life. I just want to celebrate, celebrate Earth. I just want to celebrate, celebrate the cosmos. I just want to celebrate. The sea comes alive, starts to thrive with new life forms. Storms swept the planet, plants crept on granite enchanted by the sun's solar power. The earth gave birth to green leaves and flowers. Lava flows, mountains rose, tropical islands, forests and meadows, fed by the freshwater streams, the veins, heavenly rains drain back to the sea. The fishes set free as they swim onto sand. Fins turn to limbs and they limb onto land. Amphibians, reptiles, new styles of creature, seeing through new being, the range of her features. The earth, your mother, gave birth to eyesight, looking within as she spins in the sunlight. On to the dawn, to the day of the dinosaur. Pterodactyl soars, Tyrannosaurus rex, towering, devouring. So who's up next? Mammals and primates, all life interrelated, divinely created. So don't you think it's time we celebrate it? I just want to celebrate, celebrate life. I just want to celebrate, celebrate Earth. I just want to celebrate, celebrate the cosmos. I just want to celebrate. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, John. Beautiful. Ah, I just went off into another land with that. Thanks for that. I also, before we start our conversation, I just want to acknowledge I see Pat Fleming here. Hello, Pat. One of John's colleagues and one of the co-authors on John's book from 1988, Thinking Like a Mountain with John, Joanna Macy, Pat Fleming, and Arne Naess. I'm honored to have you here, Pat. Thanks for joining. John, tell us about Deep Ecology in Australia. The title of this learning circle is Deep Ecology in Australia, Past, Present, and Future. How did the movement get started? Can you share a few stories about the beginnings of the movement?
I'm sure. So in 1982, we'd just won the campaign that we'd been waging since 1979 for the New South Wales rainforests, blockading at Terania Creek and Mount Nardi. An amazing success. Hard to imagine these days that such a thing is possible, but after 3 years of actions and a couple of hundred arrests, an opinion poll found that more than 70% of the people of New South Wales wanted an end to rainforest logging, and the government of the day legislated with a string of national parks that stretched from the border ranges down to Barrington Tops, including Terania Creek in the Nightcap National Park. And but it had also become clear by then what was happening to rainforests all around the world, that more than half of the species of plants and animals live within the rainforests, and they were disappearing at a horrendous rate. Less than a single human lifetime remained at those rates of destruction. And so clearly, in spite of being able to save a tiny speck here and a tiny speck there, worldwide, thousands of forests were disappearing for every one that was being protected. And clearly, there was no way to save the planet one forest at a time. And in trying to understand the psychological dimension of the environmental crisis. Why do human beings behave in such a self-defeating manner as to be destroying our own life support systems? I came upon the philosophy of deep ecology through a paper by one of my teachers, Robert Aitken Roshi, the Zen master from the Big Island in Hawaii, had written a paper called Gandhi, Dogen, and Deep Ecology, and that set my head spinning. And I looked at other material and quickly caught a train down to Sydney and borrowed a library card, spent 2 weeks in the stacks of the library at the University of Sydney, reading every footnote and trying to find out what I could, utterly transfixed by what I was finding out. And basically, this is that underlying all of the symptoms of the environmental crisis is the illusion of separation between human beings and the rest of the natural world. And this illusion of separation stems from anthropocentrism or human-centeredness, the idea that human beings are the center of everything and that everything else is just here as a resource for human beings. The only thing that has intrinsic value is humans. Everything else may have instrumental value if it's useful for us. But value is created by human beings. There was no value before human beings came along. The earth itself is just dirt until we humans add our labor and intelligence to it and transform it into something valuable. So this kind of pernicious error, Arne Naess, who coined the term deep ecology, he was the professor of philosophy at Oslo University, he said that this was the main driver of the environmental crisis. And I resonated wholeheartedly with that. And so started pushing deep ecology out into the world as if it was another forest to be saved. So all of my campaigning skills that I'd learned over the past 3 years, I threw into trying to push deep ecology forward. But Arne Naess had said that because this pernicious error of anthropocentrism goes so far back into our history, at least as far back as the Old Testament, where we learn that man is to subdue and dominate nature, and nature is to be in fear and trembling of us. Arne Naess said, we're not going to be able to think our way out of the mess. He said that ecological ideas won't save us. What we need is ecological identity, ecological self, a change of consciousness. And so although I was, grabbing people by the lapels and shaking them to try to get them to understand what I was learning, Arne Naess was right, and the ideas were of no particular significance. We're not going to be able to think our way out of the mess. Arne Naess said what we need are community therapies to heal that illusion of separation. And it was only some years later that the next piece fell into place. But anyway, those first 1982 to 1986 was about spreading the ideas. I had I don't know, I guess you're old enough to remember mimeograph machines where you turn this handle before there were photocopiers, where you turn this handle and bits of paper pop out. And I was sending mimeograph circulars to politicians and to public servants and left, right, and centre. Not sure that it did much good, but that's how deep ecology arrived in Australia.
I remember a part in you wrote about this, and I think I've heard you tell this story, but not for many years. When did you write about you having this moment in the forest where you realized so you've been talking about interconnection, but you had that like actual feeling moment. Did that happen before you kind of understood that other people weren't just kind of getting it through talking, they needed to feel it, or was that kind of at the same time? Or do you want to share that bit of the story?
Well, yeah, that is what started everything, because I found my way to Terania Creek to the first blockade in August 1979, which is also where I met Pat Fleming for the first time. I found my way there before I knew anything about rainforests. I didn't know there was a rainforest at the end of Terania Creek Road, though I'd lived a few kilometres away for years. I'd never visited. I didn't know there were rainforests in Australia, knew nothing about it. I just showed up because some neighbours had appealed for help, and I was curious and neighborly, and I went along and was smitten by profound, I'd have to say, spiritual realization, where I suddenly realized the intelligence and magnificence of this forest. Um, I guess if I'd visited it as a tourist, as a sightseer or something like that, it might have been different. But because I was standing there on the line between, humanity and this vast primeval forest, but not standing there as with an eye to conquest, with an eye to profit, but standing there to protect the forest, to defend the forest, I suddenly realized that I was that forest. I realized that that forest was calling me and looking through my eyes, and that my protest was the forest's protest, that I was that part of the forest that had emerged into thinking and was acting in its own self-defense. I was no longer it was no longer me being a noble person or a good person or something like that. Arne Naess said that altruism is a treacherous basis for conservation, because alter is the other. Altruism is when you defend the other. But
Yeah.
By being altruistic, you're separating yourself. That when you understand or when you experience that the nature out there and the nature in here are one and the same, they're continuous, there is no separation, there cannot possibly be any separation, then there is no other. And so then it's, and somehow self-defense is much easier to find motivation for than being good or being kind or being generous or, anything like that. So anyway, yeah, so it was, I don't quite remember how it happened, but I know that my life changed really from one day to the next.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, everything was different, and my whole agenda was put aside.
That's that's amazing. And so then this understanding that everything's interconnected and that you were acting from, almost like I'm hearing you say, from self-interest, because we're protecting ourselves as nature, as the forest, as as the interconnected web of everything. And then I think you said then you got involved in political stuff, but then eventually realized that other people actually, you wanted to provide experiences for them to kind of almost have that same kind of interconnected feeling. How did those initial kind of deep ecology exercises get started in Australia? Was it through like retreats or experimentation? I know Joanna Macy came and visited for a little bit. Like, how did you all work to develop that and share those processes? Because I feel like deep ecology in Australia has had its own distinct progression, you know.
Yeah, well, that started when Joanna Macy came to Australia for the first time, and as a result of once again, Pat Fleming was instrumental. Was Pat Fleming and Bobby Allen and other friends invited Joanna to Australia, and Pat may correct me, but I think it might have been the first workshop that she did here. But anyway, one of the workshops she did here was at the Ganundi Conference Centre in Ballina. She, at that time, was calling her workshops Despair and Empowerment. And when I went along to that workshop, I realised that here was the missing piece, because as Arne Naess had said, ecological ideas won't save us. We need ecological identity. And for that, we need community therapies. And it was through the incredible transformative power of the, I guess, spiritual technologies that Joanna Macy represented and that she brought to our attention, that she brought into our lives, that I realized that if we combined the philosophy of deep ecology with the powerful experiential processes that Joanna was carrying with her, that maybe we would be a step closer to the community therapies that Arne Naess was calling for to dispel the illusion of separation. And so Joanna was, I think, moving in the same direction at the time. I've been looking at some ancient writings recently, and it looks like I thought that I had maybe introduced her to deep ecology, but that's an error. In fact, she was already aware of deep ecology and was being influenced by deep ecology, but somehow the week after attending her workshop in Ballina, she and I were walking through the rainforests at Terania Creek, talking excitedly, and by the end of it, we had designed the Council of All Beings, the first of the experiential deep ecology workshops, and one that we still continue to facilitate. I've done the Council of All Beings at most of the workshops I've been doing in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Do you want to explain, just in case, probably most people have heard about it, but do you want to just briefly explain the Council of All Beings for those who haven't?
Well, the Council of All Beings is a process where we put aside our merely human identity and take the intention to allow the voice of a non-human being to speak through us. And so there's a certain amount of work that we do building up to that, but people aren't asked to believe that this really is the voice of koala or someone speaking through me. It's just it can just be a game. You know, kids have no trouble with this whatsoever. So you just move into that childish part of yourself and find an ally from the non-human world. And then we make a mask to represent that ally just out of a paper plate and some crayons and string. And then we go through a ceremonial portal and enter the Council of All Beings, where we just invite another voice that isn't our usual voice to speak through us. And at first it's a little bit forced, but very quickly and every time this thing starts to happen, and always we hear voices that we've never heard before. We hear things being spoken that are completely alien to the kind of conversations that we've ever been part of. And people universally report being extremely moved by that experience. And it's one of the experiences that leads us to be able to nourish our ecological identity. It's not something that you can create because it's who we are. You know, it's like to understand your ecological identity quickly, all you have to do is hold your breath for 5 minutes. And then you understand that, you know, you don't normally think of yourself primarily as being a breather, but the reality is that, you know, for billions of years, our ancestors have been inhaling and exhaling the universe without pause, and to pause even for a short space of time and we're out of the game. And this is when this becomes part of our identity, when we understand that that's who we are, and that name, rank, serial number, profession, religion, nationality, all of these things are very, very recent, like veneers over the actual ancient being that has evolved, you know, in an unbroken chain from the first cell of life on earth, that's who we are. To experience ourselves in that way changes everything.
Absolutely. I'm just looking at the time, and of course it's ticking away really quickly. And there's just so much to talk about, but I am wondering if we can then, so John, deep ecology, you know, kind of had a big kind of moment, I don't know, like 20 something years ago, and then kind of you know, was not plugging along, that's not like progressing nicely, but I feel like over the past few years, you've really been putting a lot of energy into kind of, I don't know, reinvigorating, revamping. Like what happened that made you get, you know, want to do that right now? I guess what I'm asking is, you know, yeah, that that was a very awkward question, but you know what I'm asking is kind of like, you've been working in this space for more than 40 years, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of ups and a lot of downs. There's been a lot of highlights, and then there's been probably moments for you that you're like, is this ever like, what are we doing here? How are we ever gonna like get to where we need to get? How do you, how has deep ecology like helped you continue? Why have you put so much energy into it over the past few years, especially?
Um, the way that I experience it is that this is my spiritual practice, and it's a practice of surrender. It's a
Mm,
practice of just recognizing again and again and again that I'm one tiny cell in the body of the earth, both as an individual and as a species, as a human. The human is one of 10 million species. It's not the spider in the middle of the web, it's just one strand in that vast tapestry. And as we destroy the other strands, we destroy ourselves. So by recognizing that and by participating in the experiential deep ecology processes that I facilitate, because the facilitator quickly disappears into a participant, in these
yeah.
workshops, my ecological identity is continually nourished and continually invigorated. And that's where I get my orders. So for a while there, I wasn't getting that much, and don't ask me why. But a few years ago, once again, there was this great surge of enthusiasm that welled up in me, and I feel as though I've hitched my wagon to a star, and I'm hanging on for grim life and going wherever it drags me. And I've got no idea, like as to why it should be so. But what I can say is that I've noticed at the same time as this surge in my own enthusiasm, quite suddenly, the demographic of people that were regularly coming to the workshops, because there'd always been this very enthusiastic um, response from hippies, pagans, witches, and environmentalists. But all of a sudden, it was lots of IT professionals, lots of therapists, and now some professors, and even a senator. Do you know, like, so that I think that what's happening is that people are becoming disillusioned with the dominant paradigm, with the story that of the industrial growth society, and are searching for a better way. And
Yeah.
many people are, I guess deep ecology is one of the things that they're exploring and experimenting with. But for the first time ever, my workshops are regularly filling up with a waiting
Yeah.
list, and I'm training, not training exactly, but just, and inviting lots of young people, especially, to co-facilitate with me. And I'm just feeling this great burst of enthusiasm, which is kind of a bit bewildering, coming in my 79th year, but don't look a gift horse in the mouth.
Yeah, your energy is definitely amazing. And so I'm hearing you say like community, this resurgence of, I mean, I feel like, around 2007, the whole Al Gore Inconvenient Truth and climate change like really popped up. And it feels like, I don't know, for a decade, everybody was kind of like really popping into this like climate mitigation. We can fix this, like we can fix this through technology or this or that. I think you're right. It feels like over the past maybe 5 years, everybody's going, yeah, we have to keep doing that, but also we need to do it in community. We need to do it with each other, and we need to look at our own spiritual practice and our own connections to the natural world. And it really feels like people are starting, I don't know, understanding that a little bit more. Um, and that's really interesting that you're saying it's a wider, group of different, people, because I'm feeling that too in as environmental educators. We're seeing more and more, yes, it's important to do the education for sustainability. Yes, it's important to do waste education, but the whole idea of nature connection education and deep ecology and, all all those other kind of educations are gaining, kind of the same attention maybe. How do you think, what do you think are the most, if you're talking to us as educators here, what are the most important things we need to do moving into the next few years? Like how can we use deep ecology tools? Do you have like advice or thoughts or anything about that before we kind of open up for questions and discussion?
Well, only that um, I believe that it's the intention that people bring to the workshop, that anytime a group of people gets together with the shared intention to heal that illusion of separation, the earth comes rushing in. The earth never pushed us away. It's all coming from us. The moment we make a gesture of reconciliation together in community, it's a community therapy. It doesn't need brilliant facilitation. And so I guess we realized that from the beginning, because when Pat Fleming and I, with Joanna and Arne Naess, wrote Thinking Like a Mountain, we wrote it a little bit like a recipe book. And
Hmm.
also on Joanna's website and on my website at the Rainforest Information Centre, lots and lots of recipes for processes.
Yeah.
And uh, I just, you don't need to even have participated in this. It's like you don't need even to have tasted the meal yourself before if you can follow a recipe, it works, you know?
Yeah.
So I just, of course, I feel like I've only been given one song to sing, or I've just been given one instrument to play in this vast symphony. And so I'm not trying to say that this is the most important instrument or anything like that, but it's the only answer that I can give, is to wholeheartedly recommend to people that they try this out. And we've tried to make the material as accessible as possible. But there's also lots of workshops. If people want to participate in a workshop, there's lots of workshops going on in different parts of Australia, and it's not hard to find.
Yeah. And also online. I know you do a lot of work online these days, right? And there's a big movement in Joanna's movement in the United States called the Work That Reconnects. And there's I love what you're saying. I'm hearing you say it's accessible to everybody and you can play with it. Like it's also very playful. This whole idea of reconnecting people to nature or reminding them that they are nature. It's through play and through acting and through experimenting and through being in community. It's a very important educational tool, I think.
Indeed.
Um, yeah. Um, we're at 5:40, so I'm just if anybody would like, John and I'll keep talking, but if anybody would like to start popping questions in the chat or put your hand up and ask a question, we're really happy for that, for this to move into questions and discussion about anything that we've been talking about or anything that you've been, you're curious about when you arrived here. While we're waiting, and I don't see any hands up. Andrew, if you can see hands up, let me know. Um, John, a question that comes up to me a lot about deep ecology or the work that recreates is connections to Indigenous ways of knowing and First Nations knowledges. What do you want to share about that? Yeah, or because obviously we know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledges are very much based on an understanding that we're interconnected with everything. And that's thousands of years of knowledge. And what's your thinking around deep ecology connections to Indigenous knowing?
Well, the story that I always tell, so forgive me, those people who've heard it before, is that just a couple of years after meeting Joanna, I was in the United States doing these workshops there for the first time, and somehow found myself privileged to witness a ceremony being conducted by some Indigenous people in the north, at the southwest on a mesa. And the whole community was involved in that ceremony, but there was just a handful of us outsiders watching. And to my astonishment, I saw that they were doing the Council of All Beings, which I thought that Joanna and I had just invented, but which they assured me they'd been doing for 10,000 years without a pause. And looking into it after that, I realized that I couldn't find a single example of an Indigenous community that had maintained its ceremonies that didn't have regular gatherings whose purpose was to honour all our relations, to honour that interconnectedness with the living earth, to nourish our rootedness in the living earth, to teach the children. And it made me realise that I had thought till then that the illusion of separation was a modern problem, but why then does every culture find the need to, what looked to me like the need to remind ourselves over and over again of who we are underneath the day-to-day, underneath the social, unless it's just a propensity of human beings that once we grow this bulge over our nose and start thinking our way through the world, there's this tendency to separate out. And every society, every surviving society has found a way to correct for that, which are these ceremonies. And our ancestors too were pagans who practiced these ceremonies. And if Starhawk is right, 9 million women were burnt at the stake not so long ago in order to drive these kind of ceremonies underground. And so now, the mycelial network is, popping things up like deep ecology and rewilding and nature connection and all of these things are springing back up again. And they come very naturally to us. And so to me, the experiential deep ecology is synchronous with those ceremonies of Indigenous people. It's not, we don't borrow their ceremonies, but it's coming from the same source. It's coming from the same ubiquitous human need to constantly go back to our roots.
Yeah. Yeah. And it occurs to me because we talk a lot in environmental education about place-based learning, or place responsive learning. And basically accountable beings is that, because, when we gather in person in a place, and then, at the beginning of the council, you go out and you find an ally in that local place and you become that local. I mean, I know people can become other things, from somewhere else, but mostly people are like, I've been in council of beings where somebody was a tick, or somebody was a rock, or somebody was a, whatever, an eagle flying, a wedge-tailed eagle. But mostly people aren't like zebras or, whatever, unless they really feel affiliated. But yeah, so that place-based learning is, and that's interesting. So it's like, yeah. Yeah. There's not seeing any questions. Everybody's just like oh, John, we forgot we were going to do the exercise. Did you want to do that now?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So I'm not sure if people are ready for this, but if you received the email, I guess, from Lisa yesterday, you will have a plant somewhere within line of sight, a living plant sitting in a pot on your desk, or as I have a tree outside the window. And most of the deep ecology exercises are done in a circle, are community therapies, but this is a way of nourishing ecological identity that's really fast and that you can do by yourself and that you can do anytime that there's anything green and alive nearby. And it's based on two of our ancestors way back in deep time very soon after the dawn of life on Earth, 3.9 billion years ago, some of our ancestors, who were then just single-cell bacteria floating in the oceans, invented a new molecule, chlorophyll, which allowed them to capture photons of light from the sun and use the solar energy that they had captured to break up carbon dioxide into carbon for their bodies, but inadvertently releasing a molecule of oxygen every time they did so. And oxygen was a toxic poison to the anaerobic life at that time. There was no free oxygen. For more than 1 billion years, the oxygen couldn't wreak any havoc because as soon as it was released, it would oxidize an atom of iron that had been brought up into the ocean in lava, and one molecule of ferrous oxide, rust, would fall to the bottom of the ocean. And the banded iron formations that we mine for our cars and our cities and our aeroplanes, for our civilization, that's how that iron was accumulated over 1 billion years by single-celled organisms extracting carbon from CO2. But eventually all the iron had been swept from the oceans and oxygen began to pile up, threatening all life. This was solved by another ingenious ancestor of ours who invented the heme molecule, which is the ancestor of the hemoglobin protein that carries oxygen through all animal bodies, and we learned how to utilize the oxygen by breathing it in. And that ancient cycle of partnership that started then between those who inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide and those who inhale carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen has been going on ever since then. And so this process involves celebrating that ancient connection to life stretching back for billions and billions of years. And so what I'd like you to do is to look out at this green thing, or if there's nothing like that, just close your eyes and imagine it. And with each exhalation, feel the gas leaving your body and moving towards the body of this green being. And remember that this is something that it needs for its life, that CO2's had a bad rap for important reasons, but it has a very honourable history. And this is the lifeblood of those green plants, is the CO2. So we allow ourselves to feel generous and abundant as we exhale this precious CO2 to the plant world. And then as we inhale, we realize that this oxygen is being created by those green things. And so we feel gratitude. We just let ourselves feel grateful. So this process, we'll just do it for a minute now, but I suggest that if you spend a little time with it later, you'll be amazed at what happens when you add consciousness to this exchange of gases. But for now, just have a few exhalations, feeling generous and abundant, and a few inhalations, feeling gratitude. And the more that you do this, the more that you can sense the way that the breath connects you, every single breath connects you inextricably to the living planet, that we have no independent existence. We are just one cell in this vast body. We are being breathed. And anyway, if you try this later and spend a little bit more time with it and have any interesting realizations, I'd love you to send me an email and tell me about it. Thanks.
It's the middle of the night here, but I'm looking at this beautiful green plant in my mother's house. And when I was doing that, John, it felt like, yeah, just in the space of a minute, I felt like my breathing changed and it looked like the plant was kind of waving at me. Thanks for that. We do have a few questions and the time's ticking away, so I will ask you these few questions. John, if you want to address them, or oh, there's quite a few more. Sonia, and I'm sorry I missed your question before, Sonia. She asked, what are the changes that you're noticing around the world or in your sphere that indicate a shift in understanding around deep ecology?
Well, I mean, it's minuscule compared to the size of the changes that are moving us ever deeper into the quagmire. But it does seem that more people are waking up. Um, whether it's going to make any difference or not, I haven't been given any information about that. But for me, it's the only game in town. Like, I can't think of anything else that's worth doing than to uh, try and protect nature and wake people up, regardless of what happens next. No, nothing else, appeals to me.
Yeah, I mean, it is one thing that we've had, like I said at the beginning, we had 121 people sign up for this learning circle. It's more than any other learning circle we've run in the last however many or ever, as far as I think. And for a 1 hour learning circle, that to me, that looks like people are waking up. And I remember when I was lucky to, I think it was Joanna that said this, Joanna said, John, was it? Yeah, Joanna, who says that she always has the analogy of the petri dish with the bacteria in it that like doubles itself every minute, so like a bacteria is doubling itself every minute, and you think this is never going to fill up this petri dish, like it's just going to take forever to fill up the petri dish. But then once the petri dish gets half full, one more minute later, it's absolutely full. And we don't, as humans, know when that tipping point's going to be. So we just keep working away and, adding people to our, running more workshops, doing more nature connection, doing more deep ecology. And you don't know when that tipping point is going to be when all those other people um, start joining us. And I see our friend Costa's here, and Costa's always saying, bring one person along. So if everybody brings one person along, we've already doubled ourselves, right, Costa? So, that to me is a hopeful thing. N Jams, hello, N Jams, has said huge appreciation. Deep ecology is my personal view. Deep ecology, in my personal view, resonates with the philosophy of Buddhist values and principles, which is interdependence and nonviolence. John, can you elaborate on this?
Oh, well, only to say that thanks for bringing that up, because really the last time that Lisa and I worked together was a workshop that we jointly created called, well, it started out being called Buddhism and Deep Ecology, but later got changed to Buddha Touched the Earth, exploring this huge overlap between deep ecology and Buddhist practice. Anyone who does a search on Buddha Touched the Earth will find both my essay on that subject and the workshop that Lisa is doing with the head of the Tallowood Sangha, Will James, have I got his name right?
Yep, yep.
Is doing that workshop coming up shortly, soon, isn't it?
Yeah, in June.
In
Yep,
June,
we
yeah.
had a workshop. Yep. Yeah, we are invited to join us. Because it's a beautiful, it's absolutely interconnected. Agreed. And yeah, just now running out of time. Okay. Stephen Deidre asking, given that the growing human populations are increasingly living in increasingly dense urban environments, which are often devoid of nature, and the remaining spaces are being harnessed for human purposes, where is there any sign of respite for the natural world and hope for our species?
Um, yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's right. And one of my nature connection teachers said, you can find nature anywhere. I remember doing my teacher training in New York City, and I was the teacher that I was my mentor teacher. She was determined, and we would take those 6-year-olds out in New York City and find these little patches of grass or weeds or whatever, and those kids got nature connection. So and there's a lot of work being done on greening our cities. So I know Deidre and Steve are doing really important work down there in Adelaide, and so that hope, we just got to keep going. We got to keep going with our friends, all the other species. Pat has said Melvin Sheldrake's book, Entangled Lives, is a contemporary biologist's research and deep inquiry, which also explores mutual entangled interconnections between all life, a parallel take on deep ecology, reflecting the deep interconnected biotic community that we all are. So everybody write down that recommendation by Pat. Thanks, Pat. Entangled Lives by Melvin Sheldrake. And I think he writes a lot about mycelial networks too, doesn't he? It's a really amazing book. Soraya is saying, thank you for the practice, the breathing practice. Julie, hello, Julie. Plants breathe with tiny mouths. Stomata, mouths in Greek, surrounded by swollen lips. The lips are individual cells called guard cells. What an amazing image. Thanks, Julie. And Julie is at one with bees, John. Julie does so much work for the bees. It's quite incredible. Megan is asking any recommendations for how to share deep ecology with kids who are dealing with eco-anxiety about the climate, biodiversity, and pollution crises.
You want to say anything, Pat?
That comes up a lot, and parallel to the deep ecology work, there's also been the reconnecting children with nature work, which I just see as another strand, and that however we can do it, whether it's in a playground, with a few plants, I've worked in inner city communities where we just started to build garden, and if you build community garden, you build community, you build deeper appreciation of soil, earth, microbes, plants, the way things grow. And what was so lovely, that in the middle of quite a rough area in Plymouth in England, we built a garden where we were told by the local police, well, just expect vandalism because it's pretty high around here. And instead, our little garden actually reduced all of the kind of antisocial behavior that was going on. We were able to show by growing green things in the middle of a fairly crappy housing estate, people felt better and looked after what was around them.
And thanks, Pat. And I think kids, like, giving them a connection with the natural world actually makes them feel better and less anxious. I mean, we know that there's research on that. Okay, I'm a little conflicted. We're at 6 o'clock. We're meant to be, finishing up because we like to do that at A squared E squared. We have we respecting everybody's time. But we still have more questions. So I guess what we'll do is, I don't know if John, if you're happy to hang around for a few more minutes at the end, we'll just finish up and then let people pop off that need to pop off. And then
Sure.
if you have 5 or 10 minutes to stay on
Yeah.
afterwards, there's a couple of more questions. And I see that Bobby's joined us. Hello, Bobby. Lovely to see you. Bobby Allen is here as well. I don't know, Bobby, if you were here when John mentioned you before, but lovely to see you. So I just do want to summarize and just say that we're really, like I said before, we're really appreciative of you all being here. I do want to remind you that this is recorded. It will be shared on our A squared E squared YouTube channel. And I also do want to, before you leave, share this to show you hopefully you can see that. Can you see my screen now, Andrew? No, I'll try it again. There you go. That there are lots of different ways to keep up, to continue the discussions around environmental education and deep ecology. And I really particularly wanted to share that we are running an online conference through the month of August. So one day during each week of August, we will be running an online conference. And if you are interested, you don't have to be a member of A²E². And of course, members are welcome to propose to run a presentation or a workshop. So if you'd like to see deep ecology happening at our national conference, we would love to have you do that, or presentations about anything else about environmental education. It is really an inclusive space, and we'd love you to come along. That QR code will take you to the conference website for more information about where to share proposals. And also, I just wanted to share, let you know that John's website is johnseed.net, and he has a long list of events that you can join. And also, we would love to see you next month at our next Learning Circle, which is with the amazing Monty Nixon, who's a PhD student at Canberra. And he's going to be talking about his work with reinvigorating country as teacher in outdoor and environmental education. And that's QR codes for those two things. Really, John, thank you so much. I knew that the conversation would go by like in 2 seconds, and that there's still lots more to talk about. But I just really appreciate your dedication, your passion, and your sharing. Thank you so much. So if everybody can do a little wave, clap, finger flicky thing, and thanks to everybody for joining us. Yeah, if you need to pop off, please pop off. And John, that would be great if you're happy to answer a few more questions now. Now we've done the formal whatevers. That would be amazing. Thanks, Seren. Thanks for those of you who need to leave. And the question is from Melinda. Is Melinda still here? Maybe. Let me just make sure. Yeah. Yes, Melinda's put the thumbs up. John, can you share your thoughts about the growing incidence of personhood rights being granted to the environment? So for instance, rivers or mountains being granted personhood. I know like in New Zealand, Aotearoa, the Whanganui River has been granted personhood rights. She's heard different perspectives from environmental defenders, whether it's a good idea or not. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great idea, and I've been involved in a particular project in Ecuador where we've had many projects there protecting the rainforest, stretching back to the 1980s. One of them was the Los Cedros Biological Reserve, one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, and it was occupied by a multinational mining company from Canada, and we had a series of court battles with them to try to eject them, which ended up in the Supreme Court of Ecuador, which is the constitutional court. And the Constitution of Ecuador includes the rights of nature. There's a clause giving nature rights, but it had never been tested in court. And so we used that as our argument, and the Constitutional Court sided with us. So they ejected the mining company because nature has rights. And so that precedent was set. And now there have been several cases where other natural areas have been protected without having to go to the Supreme Court, because local courts now have a precedent. And so mining is on the back foot in these areas. So I found it to be, a little bit peculiar, but it works.
Got to try all the things. Yeah, and excitingly, in A²E², we're about to launch a big project called Voices of the Water, which will be exactly that, including, yeah, so that's, watch this space. Pat has said deep ecology work also creates, builds, and nourishes community, growing resilience and wonderful deep affinity with each other as humans who love and tend the planet and include our families and communities. That's a great way to summarize, Pat. And I think that was also referring to that question maybe about eco-anxieties as well. Like the more you are connected, the less, that helps that as well. Jesse had a question that came just to me, so I don't think anybody could see it. With the current sometimes problematic nature of masculinity, what place do you see for deep ecology and masculinity? How can we help make connections for men and nature? That's an interesting one.
I haven't done any work in that space for a long time, but I guess 25 or 30 years ago, sometimes ran workshops called Gender and Deep Ecology, where we'd get together for 4 days. The first day would be a deep ecology workshop, and then days 2 and 3, we'd separate out into masculine and feminine groups, each with their own facilitators, and then come back again on day 4. And it was quite profound, the kind of learnings that took place when in that way. And I'm now that you mention it, I wonder why we stopped doing that. Maybe it's time to look at that again.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm very interested in this idea of gender, especially with everything that's happening, with the screen times and the internet and the toxic masculinity and the Andrew Tate. So, yeah. Also, I wanted to mention before, for people that don't know, with it's not that new anymore, but the abridged version of Coming Back to Life, which is Joanna Macy and Molly Brown's kind of, what did you say, recipe book, John, of all the exercises for deep ecology and the work that reconnects. They added a chapter in the 2nd edition for working with young people. That's a really good resource for you all if you didn't know about it. Coming Back to Life. The new edition has the working with children and young people, a lot of really adapted exercises and stuff like that. And it also has a section, because there's been a lot of work, especially in the United States, about working with people of color and diverse communities. So there's also a section that's been added in that 2nd edition of Coming Back to Life that I have found very useful. So I kind of feel like, yeah, that's a must-do, tool to have in your toolkit. Anybody else? There's everybody saying thank you and great and thank you so much. And Pat is an emotional well-being and deep nature connection course called Coming to Our Senses. Do you want to put in is there a link that you can pop in the chat?
It's still under development. We're just designing and we're going to pilot it. We're just going to see, over 4 sessions, because one of the things that I've really learned about connecting people more deeply with nature, and it's been shown in studies with kids, is don't keep going to lots of different places. Go to one place and keep finding different ways to connect people with that piece of country, that piece of land. And that relationship builds within them. It's not just something that's a fleeting moment. So we're just going to build it in that place and just see how we get on at the local arboretum.
Oh, that's wonderful. Maybe you can come back and share what, in a learning circle, what you've discovered, because I think we'd all be fascinated.
Well, we want to probably design a program, and then, a bit like John and I and Joanna did the recipe book for Council of All Beings, just to have a kind of smorgasbord of different things that we know will help, because it's so important to build trust and to help people really notice what's coming up for them, listening to that, supporting that and expressing it. So yeah, we want to develop something that can end up offering exercises, work that could be carried forward anyway.
That's great. Well, however, we can support you with that too, Pat, from A Squared E Squared, because we also excitingly just got a bit of funding that we're going to be rebuilding our resource network, resource offerings on our website. So hopefully we can work with you on that one. Anything else before we finish up? Costa's asking you, Pat, what arboretum you're going to be working at.
Okay, it's I'm in Lutruwita, Tasmania, which is a little island off the southeast coast of the mainland of Australia. And the Tasmanian Arboretum is just down the road from me, so we've got 5,500 trees from all over the world in a big site. So that could be a wonderful playground to be exploring this work. Yeah.
And if I know Costa, he might show up at your doorstep,
Oh,
Pat.
great, Costa, we welcome you. Please come and play in the trees.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. I think we might call it a day. John, did you want to share anything else before we sign off?
No, just, you know, what a beautiful evening. Thank you so much, Lisa, for, you know, pulling this together.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for showing up.
Thank you. And thanks again, John. And we hope we can see you again soon, and at retreats, at our conference. I hope there's a whole Deep Ecology stream at our conference now that everybody's inspired. And Andrew's popped a lot of the links into the chat. Thanks everybody for being here. Have a beautiful evening, and we'll see you again. I'm going to turn the recording off now. Thanks, everybody.